A rare opportunity that one has in his life to serve in the Texas Senate. Frankly, I've never had the opportunity. I, along with Governor Bush, am a member of the Executive Department of Government. The Speaker is a member of the House, but I'm not a member of the Senate. It just so provides in the Texas Constitution that the Lieutenant Governor presides over this body.
The Lieutenant Governor occupies a unique position in Texas government. Along with the Governor and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the office is one of the most influential in state politics. We typically think about the Lieutenant Governor as something like the Governor-in-Waiting, the person who steps in if the Governor unexpectedly leaves office. Lieutenant Governors have become Governor this way 4 times in the 20th century. But it's only happened once in the last 50 years, when Rick Perry became Governor after George W. Bush won the presidency. Most of the Lieutenant Governor's time is spent serving as President of the Texas Senate. The Lieutenant Governor wields extensive influence in the upper house and chairs critical legislative boards with statewide policy power. These legislative powers make the Lieutenant Governor a central figure in Texas politics. Former Lieutenant Governor Ben Barnes talked about his decision to run for the office in the 1968 election. His particular interest in the office illustrates how central it is to legislative politics and policy.
And after having been Speaker, I realized that the Lieutenant Governor's chair had a lot of power. As Chairman of the Legislative Budget Board and presiding over the Texas Senate, that was a place where I could get more done than I could get done as Speaker. And I wanted to see a new Constitution written very badly. I wanted to see 4-year terms for our statewide office holders rather than 2-year terms, where we could have some more strength in our state government. I wanted to see some changes made in the budgeting process, and I thought that the Lieutenant Governor's office was a very good place.
Barnes was elected Lieutenant Governor in 1968 and set about using the powers of the office to achieve some of these objectives. We asked him if his experience led him to conclude that being Lieutenant Governor seemed like a better job than being Governor.
Well, it is a better office, and you remember I had Texas I had only one Republican in the Senate. In Texas, the Senate was divided along conservative and liberal and moderate lines, and I organized the Senate in a different way than what had been organized. I took some of the more liberal senators and gave them very good committee appointments, and as a result, I got along well with all the members of the Senate. But we got legislation passed by large majorities. I mean, we had some close votes, but by and large, the program that I wanted to see passed was passing by overwhelming numbers, and the Senate was working as a cohesive body, and we had a great advantage over the House because we could do things quicker, and we could do things without as much discord and disagreement.
Barnes was succeeded as Lieutenant Governor by William P. Hobby, Jr. Bill Hobby would occupy the office for 18 years, the longest tenure in state history. Hobby also emphasizes the legislative nature of the job, but sees the Governor and Lieutenant Governor as fundamentally different from each other.
In fact, Lieutenant Governor is really somewhat of a misnomer, in that it implies that the person who holds that office is sort of a deputy governor or assistant governor, which is not the case at all. President of the Senate is a more descriptive title, and the President of the Senate makes committee appointments, refers bills, sets the calendar, and really has nothing to do with the governor's office at all.
Rick Perry has served as both Lieutenant Governor and Governor. Barry McBee served as Perry's Chief of Staff in both offices, leaving the Governor's office after the 2001 legislative session. We asked McBee about the difference between working for Lieutenant Governor Perry and Governor Perry. Like former Lieutenant Governor Hobby, he emphasizes the fundamental differences between the two offices.
I think the key difference in those two offices between lieutenant governor and governor has to do with really what you do on a day-to-day basis. As the lieutenant governor, the principal function is the presiding officer of the Senate, whether you're in session or out. And so your job there is helping manage, herd sometimes. I mean, 31 senators, all with a great deal of accomplishment and skill, all with their own constituencies, all with their own egos. You know, that's the real function of the lieutenant governor's office, of the lieutenant governor, and by extension those who work for him. The lieutenant governor can have a role in setting the overall state policy. It has a role in the overall, day-to-day governance of the state through things like the legislative budget board process. But it's, at least with Lieutenant Governor Perry, it's not the same sort of high visibility position. Governor Bullock had a penchant to make news more often maybe than lieutenant governors in the past, and maybe Governor Hobby did also. But they were there for so long. I mean, they became institutions. I mean, any lieutenant governor who's there for 15 years, is going to potentially rise to be equal in stature to the governor of the state. But when you're there for a brief period of time, as Governor Perry was, you're not going to have that same opportunity, that same impact. And I don't know that lieutenant governors will in the future. I think the office has changed also. I think these senators themselves come with, more independence. They come with more personal political power. I think the Senate has changed a little bit, where it is much more of lieutenant governor is first among equals and is not going to be the sort of even benevolent dictatorial officer that maybe lieutenant governors have been in the past.
McBee's comparison led him to an important point. The lieutenant governor must appeal more directly to legislatures than to the public, a key difference between the lieutenant governor and the governor.
Lieutenant governor's got an agenda. I mean, Governor Perry had one when he was lieutenant governor. But, there you're not as worried about going out and sort of selling that agenda to the people of the state and then having them sort of in turn come back to the legislators and get things done. Your politics are personal. I mean, you want your agenda accomplished as lieutenant governor. You got 21 of these people, men and women, that you really need to go persuade. And, they may be persuaded based on longstanding relationships. They may be persuaded simply on the merits occasionally. They may be persuaded based on sort of the give and take of appointments and dealings within the Senate. I mean, that's your focus. That's how you're going to get your program accomplished, and then you need to go the other side of the building and do the same thing with the Speaker and the members of the House, or let your senators go accomplish that. It is much less of a taking your vision to the people as a whole. It is taking your vision to a small subset of the representatives of the people as a whole and trying to get done what you want to get done.